Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what we're taking a look at, what I have on the screen here, is very similar to what we did yesterday. Yesterday, we posted from our journals to our subsidiary ledger. We have 3 ledgers now: general, accounts receivable, and accounts payable. If I combine accounts receivable and accounts payable into one book like we use for Rico Sanchez, that would be called a subsidiary ledger. Okay? Your accounts receivable ledger physical forms are going to look different than your accounts payable, and those forms are going to look different than your general. What I have on the screen here is your example of an accounts receivable ledger. Ledgers are where we take information and post it to, so if I had any questions about a specific account, it would have all of my data. So if I needed to know all of the information relating to Maria Farrell, I would go here and everything would be in that one spot. I wouldn't have to go back to previous journal pages from several years. All of my data would be here. When I look at my subsidiary ledgers, the first thing that stands out in the upper right-hand corner, I now have a 3-digit number instead of a 4-digit number. Accounts receivable are an asset account, so therefore accounts receivable ledgers would need to start with a 1. Moving across here, we have our account title here. Date column looks the same. Item column, the only time you're going to write item column in this chapter is going to be if you have to open up an account and it has a balance. If you have a balance, you need to write the word balance here, and then you also need to remember to put the check mark, right, Jory? Then taking a look at the columns that we have for numbers. You have a column here for debit and credit for recording the individual transactions from your journal. So when I look at it, if I have a debit going into my accounts receivable, basically that means we have a customer that have purchased something on an account. If I have a credit here, basically they've paid or they've returned something. We can very easily determine whether or not they paid or returned based on the post reference. If I have a credit here for $75 and my source document is G17, that means it was in the general journal. If it's in the general journal, that means the customer returned it. If there was a credit here for $100 and my post reference was CP20, that's going to mean it's with the cash payments journal, so therefore the customer paid on an account. So looking at the post reference along with the amount really gives you an idea of what really truly happened for the transaction. When I look at the balance column, this is where it's distinguishedly different from our general ledger. Our general ledgers have a debit and credit balance account. Our subsidiary ledgers will only have one balance column. Accounts payable will have a credit balance column, and accounts receivable will have a debit balance column, because that is the only balance they can truly have. So when we go through and we post to our accounts receivable ledger, the only journals that we are going to be using is going to be our sales journal, general journal, and our cash receipts journal. I think I said cash payments before. It should have been cash receipts. I would never take anything from the purchases journal and go into my accounts receivable ledger. And nothing from my cash payments would go into my accounts receivable ledger either. So the journals would dictate, because customers are going to be giving us money or they're going to be buying it on accounts. So those are going to be those accounts. And then we have the occasional general journals that we would use. So just like we did yesterday, when we went through and took information from our journal and put it into just our subsidiary ledger, we're going to do the same thing today, but just looking at accounts receivable. When we're done with all of our posting, we always have to have a way of knowing whether or not we have done our work correctly. And we know that by going through and preparing a schedule of accounts receivable. A schedule of accounts receivable really lists every accounts receivable ledger account that has a balance. If it doesn't have a balance, it doesn't need to go on it. You don't need to write Mrs. Grassel with a balance of 0, only the ones. And how we know it equals is that it equals its controlling account. In my general ledger, there is an account called accounts receivable. So I add up all of my ones in my subsidiary ledger, and I get a total. That total must equal in a totally different account that says accounts receivable the same amount. If it doesn't, I've made a mistake somewhere. And that's how you know if you've done things accurately. So truly, the steps of what we're doing are going to be similar to yesterday, but we're going to deal with receivable instead of payable. So let's look at our transactions for this assignment. Our directions read, partial sales and cash receipts journal for graphic sense are given below. Also given below are one blank accounts receivable ledger account form and a blank form for preparation of your schedule of accounts receivable. You will also need the general journal shown below. Your instructor will guide you to the following example. Now, instruction number 1 reads, start a new page for accounts receivable ledger account for Brandy Sparks. The account number is 140. The balance for October 1st of the current year is $212. So I need to go to my subsidiary ledger. I'm going to find my blank form for Brandy Sparks. I'm going to put in the account title on the very top, Brandy Sparks. Account number is 140. The date is October 1st. In the item column, we write balance. Post reference, we put a check mark. And the balance for Brandy Sparks is going to be $212. That is instruction number 1. Instruction number 2 reads, post the accounts receivable debit entry line of 5 of the sales journal to the accounts receivable account for Brandy Sparks. So I have to go in my journal to sales. When I look here in my sales journal, the only line that I have information is going to be line 5. Now, yesterday we posted from the purchases journal. Purchases journal, there is truly only one number in it, so it makes it really easy. When I look at my sales journal, I have 3 columns. I need to determine which column am I choosing from. The column I'm choosing from is going to be accounts receivable. Why? Because I'm posting this into an accounts receivable subsidiary ledger account. So I need to remember when I'm posting to take the amount from here. Is it with the Christmas lights? There's a box with Christmas lights, or in the closet in the Christmas lights below, like the display case? Okay, so when I look here, the date is the 20th. What's my post reference for this one? S10. Very good, Jordan. Why is it S10? Exactly. The sales journal abbreviates with S, and I'm on page 10 of the sales journal, so that's why it's going to be S10. So I'm going to take accounts receivable debit, $576.64, and I'm going to put it right here. Now, Brandy already had a debit balance of $212, so I need to add $212 and $576.64. When I did that mathematically, I got $788.64. Can anyone confirm that? Thank you. Last step is always to take account number 140 and put it back onto my sales journal. That is important. That tells me I just posted that. It always should be the last step. You don't go through and fill them all in at once. That is improper procedures. Instruction number 3 reads, post the accounts receivable credit entry on line 9 of the cash receipts journal to the accounts receivable account for Alfredo Lopez. So I'm going to go to my cash receipts journal. We only have one line to look at. And you will notice we only have 2 columns here that have numbers. So we have to look at it and say, all right, which column am I using? Well, just like we did from our sales journal, we have an accounts receivable column. Guess which number we're going to use? This one. It is possible for you to have a sales discount and cash, so you would have 3 numbers on there. But you always need to remember when you post to your subsidiary ledgers, you always use the column that relates to the type of subsidiary ledger you're using. So we're using the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger, so we're going to use this column. So I will switch to my account for Alfredo Lopez. I'm putting the date of the 21st. I'm going to do what from my source document? CR12. Good job. And then I'm going to credit for $254.40, which gives me a balance of $1,272. Last thing I do is take account number 130 and put it in my cash receipts journal. Instruction number 4 reads, post the credit entry line on line 3 of the general journal to the accounts receivable account for David Bishop. So I'm going to go to my general journal, and I'm truly looking at line 3. I talked about this yesterday, but when I look at my general journal, when I first taught you about journalizing in your general journal, I said, if you ever have accounts receivable or accounts payable / an account title, you have to put that / over here. The reason being is I have to post it to the accounts receivable, as well as to the account David Bishop. Right now in this example, we're only posting to David Bishop. In real life, when you get to your mastery problem, what you will do is you'll post to the accounts receivable account, and then you would post David Bishop. Like immediately you'd do one and then you would do the next one. And it would be for the same amount, this $55.12. What's happening here is we have a credit memorandum for our customer. That means this customer returned items to us. The total value that was returned to us is $55.12. We had $52 of product and $3.12 of sales tax, because we no longer have to owe that sales tax. So we're going to open up David Bishop and we're going to credit for $55.12. Date is the 12th. What do we think our source document is for this one? G11. Had a previous balance of $238.50, so I would subtract $55.12. Gave me a new balance of $183.38. Yes? Anyone else confirm that math? Yes? Good. Last step I do is put account number 110 back up top. Instruction number 5 on our directions read, prepare a schedule of accounts receivable for Graphics, Inc. on October 31st of the current year. Accounts receivable balance for the general ledger on October 31st is $2,530.22. That's good for me to know. So down here in the bottom, I'm going to put the name of the business. I'm going to do the name of the document, which is the schedule of accounts receivable, and then the date. The date is always prepared on a specific day. We will never say for month ended, for year ended, or anything. It'll always just be a date. Now, I will start with my very first subsidiary ledger account for accounts receivable. So that's David Bishop. How do I know David Bishop is first? Look at the account number, 110. So it is important that they're listed in account order. So I would go through and write in David Bishop for $183.38. Switch to my next account, Maria, for $286.20. Alfredo, have some sauce. Brandy for $788.64. And then the last line, I will not write the word total, but I will write total accounts receivable. Take out your handy-dandy calculator, add up $183.38, $286.20, $1,272, $788.64, and I got $2,530.22. How do I know if I get to do my happy accounting dance? In the directions, right here, the last number says $2,530.22. That number equals that number, which means you are rock star accountants, because it came out. Try you're on your own.